I've worked on a lot of properties over the years. Houses, restaurants, motels, you name it. Some jobs go smooth, some don't. And sometimes you run into customers that are a little different. It comes with the territory. But out of all the strange jobs I've taken, only one truly got under my skin. And it started like any other. Frank's Place. That's the name of the restaurant. It was a small pizza joint that's been around forever. The kind of place families go after a ball game or school recital. Everyone in town knows it. I knew the owner too by reputation, Frank. Always smiling, always friendly. I never really talked to him until he called me about a job. He needed some renovations done, equipment upgrades, a leaking roof patched up, fresh paint, that sort of thing. Straightforward work. He wanted it done in a week and said he closed the place down so I'd have it to myself. No customers to work around. Honestly, that sounded like a dream. He even paid me half up front. The first couple days were quiet, productive. I got more done than I expected. The place wasn't in bad shape to begin with, just needed some updates. By Tuesday evening, I figured I might actually finish early. It was Wednesday when things started feeling wrong. That afternoon, I was doing prep work for painting in the back hallway. I passed by a small office near the kitchen, heading back to check something on the far end of the building. And that's when I noticed the door. It was heavy duty, steel frame, solid core, and locked up tight with a big industrial padlock. I hadn't noticed it before, and Frank never mentioned a basement, but the way the door stood at the end of the hall, dead center flush against the back wall, it drew my eye immediately. It looked old. The paint around the frame had yellowed, cracked in places. The padlock itself wasn't rusty though. It was newer than the door itself, like it had been placed recently. I don't know why, but I tried the handle out of habit. Locked, obviously. That's when I realized something else. There were marks around the frame, subtle but there. Scratches, like someone had tried to pry it open at some point. Not professionally either. More like something desperate. That door stayed on my mind the rest of the day. I didn't know what was behind it, but it clearly hadn't been opened in a while. Later that afternoon, Frank showed up to check on the progress. He had his usual grin, asking how things were going, cracking a couple harmless jokes. I showed him the new prep station, the patched roof section, and primed walls. He seemed genuinely pleased. As we wrapped up, I casually mentioned the basement door. I told him I didn't know there was one. Just figured I'd check if there's anything that needed to be done down there. His expression changed the second I brought it up. The smile disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. He stared at me for a moment, and I swear, there was something cold behind his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Then he said firmly that the basement wasn't part of the job. He said it was locked for a reason. It was unsafe. He told me that I wasn't to mess with it. I apologized immediately. Told him that I was just being thorough. I think he realized he came off a little harsh, because he softened a bit after that. He said he didn't mean to snap at me, but the place was old and the basement wasn't up to code. Mold, exposed wiring, typical stuff. Nothing that I needed to worry about. He left not long after that, and the second he was gone, that strange tension settled in again. I kept thinking about how fast his mood changed, how it didn't feel like he was warning me for my safety, but his own, like he was trying to keep something hidden. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling there was more to it. I even found myself looking up old city records for the building, but there was barely anything listed for that property before the 90s. No floor plans, no permits, just a single mention of substructure access and a zoning note. That was it. The next morning, I was back early. I was trying to focus. I figured I'd push the weirdness out of my head and finish strong. But the mood in the building had shifted. Everything felt heavier, like the air was thicker. I started noticing things I hadn't before. How the hallway lights flickered ever so slightly. How the sound in the back corridor seemed muffled, like the walls were swallowing it. At one point, I was touching up some trim when I heard something behind me. Not loud, just the soft creak of a floorboard in the hallway. I assumed it was Frank and called out to him, but no one responded. I walked back there expecting to see him, but the hallway was empty. Still, I felt like someone had just been there. You know that weird sense when someone's watching you? I had it full force. Then, just as I turned my head back, click, a faint sound behind me. I whipped around, the basement door, Still shut, still locked. But that sound, it was the unmistakable click of a latch sliding into place. I approached it again, tried the handle. Locked. The padlock looked untouched, but I knew I heard it. I stood there for a long time, hand on the doorknob, trying to convince myself I was tired, maybe hearing things. But there was something about that door, like it was waiting for someone to try again. Frank showed up again that afternoon, said he had some work to do in the back and would be around for a while. I wanted to bring up what I heard, but I couldn't. I kept thinking about how he reacted the first time I mentioned the basement, so I kept my mouth shut. He disappeared down the hallway with a wave and that big smile. It was sometime around mid-afternoon when I heard it. I had been back to painting, trying to finish off the trim in the dining room, when a sound broke through the soft whir of the ceiling fan. Crying. Faint, but unmistakable. It wasn't just any crying either. It sounded like a girl. Soft, broken sobs that wavered in and out, like they were coming through a wall. I stopped what I was doing and listened. There was no one else in the dining room. I hadn't seen anyone come in, and as far as I knew, it was still just me and Frank in the building. The crying came again, clearer now. I stepped through the swinging doors into the kitchen. The sound was coming from further back, down the hallway. My stomach turned as I made my way towards it. The hallway was dimmer than usual, the single overhead bulb buzzing faintly, and the crying. It was coming from behind the basement door. I stood there for a long moment, just listening. The sadness in that voice, it wasn't casual or theatrical. It was real. I turned around and walked quickly back to the office. Frank was sitting at his desk, working on something at his computer. His calmness almost felt surreal after what I just heard. I asked him directly if he had heard anything. He turned towards me, his face blank at first. Then he blinked, tilted his head a little, like he didn't understand the question. He said no, that he hadn't heard anything. The crying had stopped. I stood there, unsure of what to say, feeling like the air had gone thin around me. Something about his tone unsettled me. There was no curiosity in it, no concern. Just a flat dismissal, like the whole moment had passed and I was wasting time. Frank looked at me for a second longer, then said I should go home, take the rest of the day off. He said that I looked tired, that I should get some rest and finish up tomorrow. I nodded and left, but something in me twisted the whole drive home. I couldn't shake it. That night I went straight to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my thoughts racing. Was I going crazy? Imagining sounds? Why was that basement door bothering me so much? Why would a man like Frank, so open and friendly, become a different person the second that door was mentioned? Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under. I don't know how long I was asleep when I woke up, but it wasn't the sun or any sound that did it. It was something else, an instinct, like my brain tugged me out of sleep without knowing why. I looked around the room. It was quiet, still. I got up to go to the bathroom, still groggy. Everything seemed normal, until I came back. I froze in the doorway. There, sitting at the end of my bed, was a woman. She looked to be in her mid-20s, dressed in a thin white nightgown that clung to her like it was damp. Her skin was pale, her long dark hair matted and slightly tangled. But what got me the most was her eyes. She was staring straight at me, expressionless, unblinking. I stood there, heart thundering in my chest. I opened my mouth to yell, ask who she was, what she was doing in my house. But she didn't react, didn't move. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, strained, like she had been crying for hours. She told me I had to save her. I didn't understand. Save her from what? Then she said something I'll never forget. She told me the answers were in the basement. I lunged for the light switch, flipped it on. The room lit up, and she was gone. There was nothing on the bed, nothing in the room. I stood there for what felt like forever, breathing hard, sweat cold on the back of my neck. Had I imagined her? Was I dreaming? Hallucinating? No matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, one thing stuck with me. She had mentioned the basement. She knew. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in bed until the sky outside my window started to brighten. And when the sun came up, I knew what I had to do. I got dressed, grabbed my gear, and drove back to Frank's place. As I pulled up, my stomach tightened. There, standing behind the front window, barely visible through the glass, was her. The same woman, the same face. She was real. I walked in, passed through the empty dining area, and made my way back to the back hallway. My footsteps echoed differently that morning. Everything felt still. I pulled out my bolt cutters. The lock on the basement door came off with a hard snap. I opened the door. The air changed immediately. It was cold, thick, the kind of heavy, oppressive air you only feel underground. I could barely see down the staircase, but I started down anyway, one slow step at a time. At the bottom, I found myself in a wide-open chamber. The walls were rough stone, old and damp, with strange black markings etched into them, symbols I didn't recognize. Dozens of melted candles lined the floor and led up to a raised platform in the center of the room. Atop it sat an altar. Dark stains covered the stone slab. The air smelled like copper and mildew. Chain shackles hung from rusted hooks in the walls. Animal bones littered the floor. But they weren't all animal. Tattered robes lay in a heap in the corner, like whoever wore them had simply vanished. But what made me turn and run wasn't the symbols or the bones or the smell. It was the shape on the altar. A human form, covered in a black sheet, motionless. I didn't lift the sheet. I couldn't. I just ran. I got back in my truck, peeled out of the parking lot, and drove straight to the police station. I told them everything, every detail. They sent officers out to investigate, but according to their report, there was nothing there. No basement door, no altar, no body. They said the basement didn't exist. They said the restaurant was locked up tight. I knew then something deeper was at play. I started digging, researching, pulling at every loose thread I could find. I found references to an old fraternal order that had roots in the town, way back in the early 1900s. The names were vague, the mentions scarce, but one thing stood out. Whispers of a secret society operating under religious pretense. Rituals, sacrifice, a community built around it. The more I looked, the more I saw familiar names. Local officials, business owners, people who smiled too wide when you passed them in the streets. And then the letters started. First in my mailbox, then slid under my door, anonymous, threatening, warning me to stop digging. I started seeing the same cars parked near my house. I felt eyes on me when I left for work. I changed my number, shut down my accounts. I packed what I could and left. I moved to another state under a different name. I started over. But even now, I can't relax. Sometimes I wake up at night and feel like someone's outside, watching, waiting. And every so often, when I pass a mirror or glance out the window, I swear I see her. The girl in the white nightgown. She hasn't left me, not really. And deep down I know the truth. They're still out there, and one day, they might come for me.